is a constitutional attorney. He is also the author of an important book, The Authoritarians: Their Assault on Individual Liberty, the Constitution, and Free Enterprise from the 19th century to the present. It is a really important manual for understanding the fix we're in at the moment at the hands of authoritarians, both those Marxists and revolutionaries that we've been talking about with Sam Faddis and Trevor Loudon in our previous segments, and those inside the government who are at least sympathetic to them, if not deeply aligned with that radical leftist agenda. Jonathan, welcome back to Securing America. It's always good to have a chance to visit with you, sir,
Great,
especially troubled times like these.
great to be with you, Frank.
Thank you. Um, you haven't heard my previous interviews, but I know you are as keenly concerned as are those other guests about what has been developing over the years, notably through what has been called by some of the perpetrators a long march through the institutions, cultural Marxist march through the institutions. Remind us what the authoritarians have done in that regard and how it has brought us to the present pass.
Well, we have seen really since Felix Frankfurter began to bring his own Harvard Law students who were far left, actually Marxists themselves, into the Roosevelt administration, a steady development from the very origins of the administrative state of uh, far left and Marxist elements. And these things, Whittaker Chambers revealed these things. Our own Signal Corps discovered the extent of the involvement, even to the extent of aids to the President of the United States. I mean, we have seen a constant effort on the part of the left to take over America through the use of authoritarian means via the administrative state. And the very origin of the administrative state is an unconstitutional act. There is no constitutional basis for the creation of an institution outside of the branches of government that are prescribed by the Constitution that would be invested with legislative, executive, and judicial power. And yet that happened here in this country without an Article 5 amendment, just by a power grab. And it was done in the late 1880s. And the philosophy that drove people in this direction is actually quite remarkably a philosophy that was accepted as a basis to defend the institution of slavery against abolitionist cries for the end of it. That is in the antebellum South. And at that very time, academics in the South and government leaders, even John C. Calhoun, wedded themselves to Hegelian socialism, to Hegelian collectivism. And that viewpoint then became popular after the Civil War and continued on thereafter. And to the present,
Yeah.
collectivism is the mantra that guides the administrative state.
Can I just ask you, because I know that this is a particular concern and has to be given the power of that administrative state, but unfortunately, it's not the only institution that was targeted by these authoritarians, Marxists, what have you. Give us a flavor of their march through the culture, through the media, through academia, and you mentioned um, Felix Frankfurter's law students. Another uh, aspect of what we've just seen playing out in this Supreme Court drama is the concern many of us have that radical leftists coming out of law school are now beginning to populate in earnest positions like clerks to the Supreme Court, and ultimately, of course, members of Congress and other roles in the executive as well as the legislative branches and judiciary itself. How are all of these things taken together, giving rise to an existential threat to our constitutional republic, as you see it?
So we have seen in academia, and that's a hotbed for the breeding of cultural Marxists.
Right.
We've seen in academia this cancel culture, this utter repudiation of all things constitutional in America, essentially an assault on American exceptionalism and greatness, attempting to describe this nation falsely as one that was born out of slavery, when in fact it was a society that was, from the time of the Declaration of Independence forward, dedicated to the advancement of individual liberty. And that achievement brought us through a civil war. But despite the reality of our history, the fantasy of the far left is a Marxist vision of a utopia in which they have control and dictate to the rest of us how we are to live our lives in a classic Marxist hell. And that is their goal. And so you see Antifa and BLM largely driven by the academia, and students who are dedicated to the cause of destroying the nuclear family, of destroying religion in America, of destroying democracy, of attacking government at every level, of destroying free enterprise. So everything that describes the American epic, which is a great period of liberty and prosperity, they are against, and so they populate this administration, for example. People are completely befuddled and overwhelmed by the idiocy that they see daily coming out of the Biden administration. But that idiocy is driven by this altered state of mind, which is far left. And that is why we experience these horrific calamities with no apparent concern on their part. They
Yeah.
don't respond to inflation like Democrats of old. They
Right.
don't, it's just not
Or let
happening.
alone the average American. And I think it was the Bard, William Shakespeare, who said there is method to their madness, and the
Right.
method is, I think, Marxism, perhaps only of the cultural kind in some cases, but it seems ever more so the actual revolutionary kind. We're going to take a short break. Jonathan Emord will be right back with more specifically about what can be done and, more to the point, what is being done by one courageous governor, Ron DeSantis, to try to stem this tide and reverse it. God love him. We'll talk about that more straight ahead.